Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for coming. Between word and work, we are having a talk today. My name is Boris Magrini, and with Samuel Leuenberger, founder of Salon and curator of Salon in Basel. Vanessa Safavi, artist living in Berlin and Basel, from Franco-Iranian origins. And Michele Robecchi, editor at Phaidon, and also critic and curator. We are here today to discuss about the dialogue between artists and critics, between the production of a work of art and the reception of the work of art. And this is the reason why we invited a critic and artist, and Samuel Leuenberger and myself, we are going to moderate the talk. This is a talk also organized on the occasion of the publication of the new series of the Cahiers d'Artistes by Pro Helvetia. You know that Pro Helvetia every 2 years offer a publication to young emerging artists, and this year there's a new series coming, so we organized with Samuel Leuenberger and me. We received a mandate to curate and organize a series of events on the occasion of this publication. So this is also, let's say, the reason we are also having this talk today. And I would like to thank Pro Helvetia and particularly Patrick Gosatti and Marianne Burki for this event as well. So I think it's time to start. Michele, I have a first question for you, maybe.
Okay.
Since we're talking about relation between work and writing and word and work, there has been a lot of formal approach theories of art, theories of analysis and critical analysis, ekphrasis, iconology, systems aesthetics. Several attempts have been made to propose a prescription to approach the critical writing about art. So have you been interested or influenced by any of such approach? Do you think that these kind of formal approach are still interesting today?
Yes, I think they are. Obviously, as a writer, I've been interested in most of them, but to be honest with you, I really feel that it's important when you start writing to develop your own approach to things. I think it's a very kind of empirical practice. So, although I've been trying to be reasonably aware of what has been happening before my time, and in general, what kind of trends and currencies and methodologies of writings are around. I pretty much try to do my own thing and do my own mistakes and
yeah,
and see where it goes from there.
So how do you, for example, when you write a text about an artist, how do you proceed? Do you prefer to write on your own, to concentrate on the work,
well,
or do you engage in a dialogue?
Okay, that's a very
artist?
Personal, I mean, I don't think there is a golden rule on how to go on about these things. Personally, what I try to do is not to read too much literature about the artist before I start writing. I know it sounds a bit inconsistent, but at the same time, I feel that in order to develop my own ideas, when I start in front of a blank piece of paper, I think it's much better if I don't know too much about what's been written already. Also to avoid repetition or being influenced, so my method is to write first, and then I read afterwards, and I try to make sure that what I put together makes sense. I try to read interviews by the artists, though, statements and things like that, because that's where I can see where their thinking comes from.
So you concentrate on the writing by the artist, the original source, if you want to call out to say.
I look at the images. I mean, to me, that's the starting point. I just look at the images first, because I think we're talking about visual art at the end of the day, and I think that's where I should start. And then if there is something particularly obscure or I feel that needs some sort of explanation, I try to read what the artist had to say about it. And if there's nothing there, my last final resource is to read existing text. But I try to not to do that too much,
Okay.
if at all possible.
Maybe we'll come back to the literature, the question about the literature. Samuel, what about you? When you write, or when you curate a show, how do you proceed? Are you influenced by such formalism, or do you, what do you do to write a critical text about an artist, or do you also, like Michele, prefer to isolate a little bit before and not read too much? Yeah. How do you proceed?
No, with me it's always a big battle between the word and the image. Usually the words that I write come in the very last stages before a show is actually up or the work is finished or the whole process and the encounter with the artist has kind of been done. Mm-hmm. For me, the work as well, of course, comes first, and I try to find the words that fit around it, that support it, that contribute to it at a later stage. Having said that, I think it's you can totally have a different approach at the space that I have. So it's one of the reasons why I invited Quinn Latimer, who's a critic and a poet, to co-curate shows and curate a separate program there that's always based around the writing and the word. And it's fascinating to me to actually see the opposite, somebody who actually defines every word down to the T, the concept, and then actually starts creating the visual, the exhibition around it. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating actually to see also how artists who are invited to a show like this, if it's more loosely based, the concept, or if there's actually some very specific writing that is already given to the artist, the results are stupendously different. And I think it's an approach question. Mm-hmm.
Vanessa, we were speaking about how critics writes about art, writes about work. And in your work, you all sometimes or often deals with question of course, the appeal of the exotic, but you also tackle the problem of meaning. And we're talking before about the presence or not of words in your work, and in the last years you abandon a little bit this approach to words, but still I have the feeling that one of your leitmotiv in your work is the question of abstraction. How, whether it be in anthropology, in biology, in taxonomy, I mean, there's always this question of the scientific approach that needs abstraction in order to understand the things they study. And even modernism, the abstract art, this process of abstraction is very present in your work. So do you think the society has lost the possibility to see the world without frames, without this approach that needs an abstraction in order to understand the world?
Well, it's a bit complicated. I think I substrate words with my work, with images, with. I don't think it's actually interesting that you invite me for that talk, because I don't think that I use the words. Actually, I would say not. Yeah, I think I try to constrict my work that would be words, and so then avoid words. And I think that abstraction, I mean, it's just a way to. Maybe to avoid reality, just to construct another reality through your work. But I think, our society will be, it's a very difficult question, I think. Yeah, I think people need frame, like in any context, for sure. I don't think, but as an artist, I suppose, I also need some frames, but I just develop, a language with my own work. And, yeah.
Maybe to understand a little bit, to shift the question in your practical, in your everyday experience with critics and curators. How do you approach a critic when you, for example, when you have a catalog that is going to be published? I understand that you probably have a publication soon coming up. How do you approach a critic that writes about your work? Do you let him write? Do you trust him or her? Do you on the other side, on the other way, maybe you try to influence the critic and make sure that the critic writes properly, or at least got the vision right of your work, or you just trust on the critic and
It depends if I know the critic or not, first of all. I think, no, I will rather let him write first, but obviously, I mean, it also has to do with an encounter, you know, I mean, obviously you create like a relationship with someone that hopefully like you walk and want to write about it. So I suppose I will definitely let him write, and then obviously, I mean, I suppose that also we will talk before, and yeah, I will let him write.
So you basically you tend to trust critics and trust.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you think it's your work, because your work is quite hermetic? It's not in a bad way, but I mean, I have the impression that your work offers several layers of interpretation, of lecture,
definitely.
possible lecture. So I was wondering, you certainly have your own meaning as well when you create a work, but do you want this open lecture to be possible? Do you want
Definitely.
the critic
I believe
and
that,
the audience?
I believe that other interpretation kind of empower your work. I mean, that's also because I also work with a lot of biographical input and from personal experiences that will meet like a certain knowledge or a certain interest. So, I think it's a mix. Yeah.
Have you ever been surprised?
I've been surprised always in a good way for now.
That's good.
But I'm sure it's going to happen in a bad way too. I mean, you know, you can avoid that, especially today with like internet and all, you know, like that speed of how information. And you should, I mean, I just don't want to have to care too much about that, I think. It's just, I just already have to stand for myself. So then it's like someone else. But I mean, yeah.
Surprise, yes.
Surprise,
well, I think it's also an issue of context in the sense that if we're talking about a catalog essay, obviously this is about championing what you do in a way. Whereas if it's a magazine article of some kind, there is room to be a little more critical.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I like interview, and I've been always very well surprised of like other people's interpretation, and as I said, it's open doors basically for me. I'll take it as a good opportunity to also create a new dialogue with my own work, maybe. But I just try to stay open with that.
And you just said that you actually enjoy talking about your work as well.
I do, but it's very well. I mean, my work as well is. I mean, it's not that easy to understand as a first step. Also, because I work a lot with, you know, I don't have even myself with my own work. I don't have a very frontal approach to it. I would rather like have sinuous path and of like discoveries and then going back to certain ideas and lost myself, and I also believe in the failures as well. We were talking. So.
But it's really nice that you're open to different interpretations, because often to me what happens is that some artists or their galleries or people associated with them, they're really fond of one way to read the work and they would like you to stick to it.
Did you have an experience with somebody who was trying to force you into one vision, one kind of writing, or?
Maybe not necessarily forcing me, but definitely, giving me a strong indication that that's what the work is about. That's what you should say, and don't forget to mention this, and that. Which is kind of restrictive, from a writer perspective. I mean, I find it extremely frustrating when you have to just adhere to something like that. Of course. And so it's quite nice to hear that.
Yeah, but as I said, because I think also I deal with certain concepts that deserve also other interpretation, that there is no there is not any one vision about it.
And I think, I personally believe that that's where also a lot of great art is, in the sense that there are more layers and opportunities to read the work. It's not just so monothematic or monolithic, which I guess is what you're doing. Because when I learned about your work, I was really fascinated by how wide the spectrum is to, you know, for discussion and for, even though there are very specific elements here and there.
But it's always a question always from the visitor, I mean the viewer.
Yeah,
it's always a
course.
question of commitment.
Yeah.
You want or not going through a work of art.
If you wish that kind
You
of
can just pass
engagement.
it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an engagement. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that I consider, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's up to the people to enter or not in the work. And I suppose my work demands a little bit of effort for that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But don't you have the feeling sometimes that when people write about your work, they, instead of making your work accessible, they maybe put a filter on it and prevent people to reading your intention that you wanted to attribute to the work? You know what I mean?
What do you mean
Or
prevent? Sorry.
prevent, I mean that instead of making your work accessible to people and making people understand your meaning of the word, they attribute other meanings, and so they filter the word.
Oh,
they
yeah.
filter the vision that you wanted the people to have
But that's the
about
deal.
the word.
That's the game. You can always.
They dilute it. It's a dilution.
Mm-hmm.
But it has a lot to do also with how well you know the work, you know. A lot of people get asked to write something about an artist's work and they don't actually spend enough time researching the artist's work, you know. And then you get into the moment where you're actually not happy with the words that are being used or, you know, how things should be described.
But I believe that word can fix things for a certain moment, but not forever.
No.
I suppose this is.
No, but they can stick around for a long time if the wrong words are being published about your work, you
But
know?
then you're good enough or not to kind of just go, you know, outline that or somehow, you know.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think critical credibility is earned that way. I think at the end of the day, it's really about. Actually, I'm really another tendency I'm not really fond of is when you see the same people writing about the same artist all the time. I think that's really bad. It's bad for the artist,
Yeah.
and it's bad for the writer too.
Yeah.
Sorry, say it again. What is bad for the artist and the writer?
Well, when you have the same people writing about the same artist all the time, because it turns into some sort of mascot that way. As a writer, and you don't really allow more, you know, more opportunities to just interpret the work or to add anything else, and you know, new dimensions, new perspectives. I think it's really, if you check recent history of art, you see that all the artists that earn enormous critical credibilities are those who had many people writing about the work. Of course, not just because of quantity, but because also of variety.
Maybe we can go back to the first experience when you had the Calle artist, Kim Soeb Bonizeni wrote about you. I remember it was a quite particular text. I read it again a couple of days ago, and I remember I realized that it's a way of writing which is very anecdotal, and he didn't really propose a vision, a very personal vision of your work, but on the other side, by way of explaining or relating some personal experience, the way of life in Geneva and Lausanne, somehow he managed to give an angle to approach your work. Maybe you can describe how it was the relation with Kim. How did you? What was the dialogue with him?
First of all, Kim is a very old friend of mine, so he knows me, and that's why he was able, I suppose, to. And also, I was a very young artist when I get the Calle, so I was not like my practice was not like that was still really growing up, you know. Yeah, but I mean even more. So you can imagine. So it was very first of all, I suppose, difficult to talk about my work somehow, and also maybe the distance or something. But what he did was, I think, a very smart thing is that he didn't like. He let I don't know how to explain that. He just wrote a text about positions and attitude as an artist more than like just artwork, and that's I think sometimes even more interesting than the work itself, and also because the Calle, I dedicate the Calle more as a archive and documentation thing more than documentation of my work. There's very few artwork that you can see in the Cahiers.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's more images.
You basically use it as almost as an artistic project
Yeah.
itself, which
Yeah.
I thought it was quite interesting approach as well.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read it in a while, but I remember it almost read like a poem. It was just
Yeah.
sort of
You make the connection with the movie Into the Wild.
Into
Even
the
though I'm
Wild,
not a
exactly.
big fan of that movie,
Exactly.
it's very
Exactly.
strange. But we had this conversation with him in a restaurant one night, and I said, you know what I like about this movie is that, I mean, it's really show how life is suddenly very absurd, and the guy, I mean, the hero of the movie, he eats the wrong herbs because it's the story of this guy wandering in the nature, like finding, wiseness through wandering and discovering other people and everything, which is very kind of really like close to my idea of the way I work and everything. And then he at the end of the movie, just mix up two herbs, and one of them is toxic, and he dies.
Yeah.
And it's so absurd that after all this, conquest of,
But one
it's
thing
just
about
die
that,
and-
one thing about that character is that he wanders around the world looking for things.
He what?
He wanders around the world
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
for things, but he really sets himself. How can I put it? He really has developed a set of limitations for himself when he does that. And I was wondering if in a very abstract sense, you feel like you do the same.
That I don't know where I'm going to stop, or
If you have some kind of guideline that you self-impose on yourselves to.
Maybe, I don't know if I can say that my work is spiritual, because, I mean, there's nothing to do with religion or everything, but I think, I mean, as an artist, like, there is this beautiful artwork from Bruce Nauman saying that like the neon spiral that says the artist is looking for spiritual truths or something like that.
Something like that,
quote?
yes, I know
So I
this.
suppose it's kind of something similar to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's a quest.
It's a quest, yeah.
Samuel, what about you? What about your experience? You also wrote a text this year for Claudia Comte.
Claudia Comte, yeah.
How was the dialogue? How was the dialogue with the artist? You knew her well before? Did you engage in a close dialogue, or did you write on your own? How did you approach the text?
No, I was asked to write the text last fall. I haven't known her for a long time back then, but I really liked the work, so it was nice to be asked. No, I think it's just looking and talking a lot about her work itself, and but to me, it's I always try to actually be quite descriptive. For some reason, I feel like this is kind of my job to do. So I mean, I think there's a big trend right now to do a lot of associative texts and poetic texts and things that contribute on an artistic level to an artist's work. And so with her, it was quite clear, because she does so many things in different mediums, that the goal was really try to kind of show the overall interest in her work and what you can pinpoint it down to.
Yeah.
And because Guillaume Pierre was also asked to write a text for the Calle artist, and he, on the other hand, did a very freely open poetic text about the zigzag lines in her work, and so it was a nice contribution on a different level. But to me, it's always like I think the work has to speak enough for itself, and the text that I write should just be descriptive enough to broaden a little bit the understanding of the work, and the rest, I think, is a dangerous path to go down to, because you don't want to pinpoint things too much down.
Right.
Because that's the reason why we're also looking at the visual arts. I think there's a big discrepancy between the word and the image, where when the word becomes too dominant, you're actually losing interest in the work. So,
description. I remember back years ago when I was studying art history, the professors were always stressing how important it is to describe, and there was always this exercise, putting a dia on the wall and having the students describing the work, and how difficult it is actually to describe in words a work of art, and to be to stay to the description and not shift to the meaning or interpretation of the word. But at some point, maybe you have to propose a vision. And maybe we should get back also to the question of literature. How do you deal with the literature? One of the, for example, when I write about art, one of my main problems or difficulties is if a work of art already has been described and analyzed by many, many critics before, you want to write something new. You don't want to write the same things that has been already written, but you also want to write something meaningful for the world. You don't want just to just write something that doesn't make any sense. So how do you deal with this question, Michele? How do you approach this? You said before you don't you don't write.
Yeah,
you
no,
don't read.
I think I already answered.
Yeah,
that
you
in a
already
way,
answered
but,
somehow.
you know, to go back to the Cahiers, that's an interesting one to me.
Yeah,
because that's,
maybe you can.
Because that's something that, because we're talking about the artist made and publication, you need to write something which acts as some sort of introduction to the practice of the artist. So I can see the point of being descriptive, but at the same time, I think I really like, what I really like about your Cahier is that the text is somehow complementary to the work, almost as it runs parallel. And it doesn't get too specific on things.
No, no,
it's
no.
just a very, very wide general
It's
description
just,
of
talk
what.
about position, I think.
Exactly,
Yeah.
more about positions, and then he let you do the work as a viewer by looking at the other pages, which is a very interesting way to put together a book, and I think it worked quite well in your case.
I mostly like reading an interview, an artist interview, or because I find it more accessible somehow. That's sometimes like very big empirical, theoretical text. But I mean, a descriptive text also is a interesting way also to approach an artwork and not being too important somehow.
I think so. I mean, I think you just run the danger. I think if you obviously. If you have a creative text that's very associative and you create another artwork for example, for a publisher, and it can work super good. It could be a super coupling. It's just a choice, you know, what it should be. But
that's what writing should be as well, no? What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And again, I think it's always a matter of context too.
Exactly. Yeah.
If I'm writing, if I am reviewing an exhibition, of course I'm going to be descriptive. That's not a way around it. It would be. I don't think that's the place where you can be, you know, where you can just let yourself loose on major theories and contemporary art and the sort. I think you really have to stick to what's in front of you, especially given the limited space that you have at disposal.
The space is also sometimes a problem. What about, maybe you can also go back to your experience. This year you wrote about Sidi Vanetta and Andreas Giesing. How was the dialogue with the artists? How did you manage the space?
There was a learning process.
Was it a learning process? Okay.
Yes, because, well, as you probably know, they are a bit of an oddity, if you like, in the contemporary art-wise. So there's not much written about what they do, which suits me fine, but at the same time, I read a few interviews they gave, and people tend to ask them the same questions all the time, and you know, and as a result, they always say the same thing. So it was really hard to find like an entry point in it. But no, eventually, I mean, and there's also, of course, one of the major problems there is also that you have a very limited amount of space to write. I'm not used to. Either I'm comfortable at writing very short things or very long things, but the midway doesn't quite work for me, because then I tend to explore more and get taken by the spark of it and just fly away. And
sorry.
So what is the most interesting kind of writing for you? So something you prefer?
Category-wise?
Yeah, just critical writing or more like long essay? I mean, where do you actually get the most joy out of confronting yourself with the artwork that you're looking at? Can you be very critical? I
think it really depends by the artist. You know, sometimes I even enjoy writing long texts about one single work. That's really satisfying to me. And it really depends. And I think we were talking about it earlier on, that because I have a magazine background, when I started, I was forced to write about artists I didn't like.
Yeah, that's also
because I was a
something.
junior writer, so
Yeah,
I was working on assignment, and
Which can be interesting as well.
it actually turned out to be really interesting and
Yeah.
really useful, because that's where you get surprised when you actually change your mind or find out things that you would actually ignore. I think it's very, very dangerous if you only write about people you like.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other way around too. I mean, I know that there are writers that made a career out of writing negative things all the time, which is really easy, of course. It's very easy
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
There's a guy that writes for modern painters. I can never remember his name, but he made a career out of being negative on absolutely anything.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, it's fun. I mean, it leads somewhere, but I don't think I think it's hardly constructive.
You know, it's funny because art criticism, when you look back at the history of art criticism, sometimes you have the feeling that criticism was really
Harsh.
very harsh and
Yeah.
very. There's always these stereotypes about Cubism, Impressionism, and all the critics writing against
Yeah.
them, and then being the
That's
almost
true.
having the bad part of the job. But if you think of criticism today, it's quite rare to find negative criticism in the professional world itself. Of course, if you take the everyday press, that's something else. But I mean, the people working inside the art world usually tend to, I don't know, maybe it's a question of maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. What is your feeling?
No, I agree. I tend to agree. But I'm curious to know one thing here, because as I said, sometimes I had to write about artists I wasn't particularly interested in, and it proved to be a minor life-changing experience. I discovered things I didn't know, and I was pretty pleased with it. So I was happy to be wrong in a way. And at the same time, I was wondering, did it ever happen to you that you read something negative about your work that you took into account?
That I took it personally, you mean?
No, that you took into account, like,
oh,
that's
oh.
interesting. I never thought that. That's actually not a good thing, but it makes a point.
I don't think I really have that experience yet.
Okay.
No.
Good.
But I'm sure, I mean, it will...
But you will be open to it. I mean, to the idea
For sure, yeah.
of
no, I
learning
mean,
something
it's-
about yourself through somebody else's mind.
I think it's like in life, in reality, you cannot have affinities with everybody. And
Yeah.
it's the same with artwork. And I think it's totally fine.
Yeah, but my question was more about if you are...
Yeah, if I will develop, like, take it for granted,
more if you would be open to the idea that somebody else can tell you something about your work that you didn't think of and that might make sense.
For sure, no,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Your experience with Phaidon, you're editor at Phaidon as well, and at the same time you're curating as well, writing text also in different. Do you have, how do you manage these activities that experience by Phaidon did influence you somehow? Do you have as an editor, the fact that you also edit books and need to have a choice in selecting the artists, the books?
Yeah, I think it does. It does because when you are an editor, you read a lot of other people's writings,
Yeah.
and as a result, yes, it's definitely a learning. You definitely pick up something on that. At the same time, it put me in a bit of a funny position because now what happens is that when I write, I tend to have a better understanding of what the editor's requirements are. And conversely, when I'm the editor, I tend to sympathize a lot with the writer, which is not necessarily what my publisher would like me to do.
Okay.
But I think it's a result of my sort of swinging between these two positions all the time.
How much freedom do you have as an editor?
Freedom in terms of what?
In terms of selection and choosing and...
Well, I am a commissioning editor of a series of monographs, which means that I am entitled to make recommendations and promote and propose artists that I reckon are suitable for the series. Then my proposals go through a series of very painful meetings with people that maybe are not necessarily so conversant with contemporary art, but knows a lot about the book market. So I think it's actually interesting to see what they have to say about it. And once we were through that and my proposals got approved, then I started commissioning the book. But the book is always made in collaboration with the artist. We normally try to make sure that the artist is comfortable with our choices in terms of authors. Actually, this is something that we develop together. And to go back to what you were saying, it's interesting to have people that, it's interesting to strike a balance between people that really know your work, that are very familiar with the work of the artist, and maybe experiment with new writers that might be able to provide a new insight into the work.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I always see these books, I always describe these books as some sort of marriage opportunity, if you like.
That's a nice way of looking at it. Vanessa, did your approach to critics and maybe also curator change with the years? Do you think that by having a more international career, you change your approach to how you confront yourself with a critic or with a curator when you think back at your first experience?
Not really. I don't think. Well, I mean, you just get to know more people, and you just get used to read something about you and just deal with that. But I don't think I think I try to keep the kind of a certain distance with that other world, because it is another world somehow.
You probably told me that you're trying to have also maybe there's not so much. You're still young. There's not so much years between your first experience and but you don't like. Probably you don't. It's too soon to tell, but you don't have the feeling that the reaction, the reception of your work by the audience or by the curator, by the critic, did influence, did shape your way of choosing, or what you're not interested in seeing what appeals to the people in order to go to one direction.
Oh no.
Probably not, but I mean, it could be a strategy as well. I mean, you sometimes, I don't know, someone what you think, but sometimes you see strategies by artists that are trying to appeal or to go toward the critics, toward the curators, to appeal to what might seem like the
but it's the same
trend.
the other way around too.
It is, yeah,
Actually,
probably
it's
true.
more of the same the other way around.
I'm sure, yeah. I don't know. No, well.
It's fine to say no.
I think, yeah, it's a good opportunity. I will not like deny that I don't mind at all, and I'm completely like out of that. But I mean, that's not part of my work, That,
of course.
So I cannot really control it anyway. So, but I mean, what you can do is being aware enough to just choose the people you want to work with, and this is also something I want to do and continue to do. I mean, definitely choose Kim because he was a very important person in terms of what he teach me and what he bring to my, So that's why for me it was obvious that it would be him, and I will never choose someone from a name,
That would be interesting to know. Do you choose rather people that you feel close to your work, or
sure.
people that are the opposite and maybe challenge you in somehow, or maybe bring you to a new direction?
That could be also something interesting, and maybe something. I mean, now I could feel more comfortable with that because I feel confident with I feel good with my practice, and so it would be actually a very good thing. Maybe also work with like scientists or poets or other, Yeah.
And I think it also depends, as you said, by what stage of your career you are.
Yeah.
I think it makes perfect sense when, for your first publication, you might decide to rely on someone that really knows you well.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And later on, when there is a fair amount of literature about your work, that's the time where you can experiment and try to find new perspectives and new people that you would like to be engaged with on an intellectual level.
I mean, yourself, Boris, I mean, you're also, for example, for Kunstbilder, where you work. I mean, how do you do yourself? How do you select
Well, yeah.
Who writes?
No, that's a good question. It's you
writes
try
for
to
what?
look at I mean you
Geographical.
prospect, and then you have some. Of course, you have some guidelines you want to choose because you have just one page every month. So you try to make the best out of it. So you prospect and you try to have a variety of topics, of artists, and also of institution. You don't want to write the same artist because for the same institution three times in 6 months. So there's a lot of parameters you need to try to adapt. But basically, you try to select an event, an artist, a topic that you think it's interesting and it's exciting and also intellectually appealing. Then it's of course a personal question. What interests me in a moment or not? I have a last question. I'm running into a book by Leonard Schlein recently, The Alphabet versus the Goddess. And it's a very particular book. It's about the fact that the history, in his opinion, the history of mankind, of society, was extremely influenced by the alphabet, by the invention of alphabet and words and literature. And in his opinion, the alphabet replaced the images somehow. And he associated the alphabet with the masculine word and the images to the feminine word. And he justified the fact that the society developed a patriarchal society because of the alphabet, because of the invention of the alphabet. This is a very funny, it's a very particular opinion. Do you think alphabets and words are masculine? Do you think images are feminine? Do you think one can separate a different, one can relate to this question in this term?
I don't think these things are gender related. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting point, but I don't know.
But maybe to go a little bit further, do you think the words, the appearance of the words, and the fact that words are becoming so dominant in our society did have an impact on the reception of art and on the shaping of the society as a whole?
Well, it definitely did at a certain point, yes, but that's good. I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I don't think actually art criticism is so relevant today, unfortunately. But in terms of visibility but again, maybe this is not a bad thing because it gives you a license to write more freely about what you like and what you don't like.
And make that sort of interpretation as well.
Yeah, but it's not. I think it's as it's important to make art, it's important to sell it. I think it's important to write about it. It's important to talk about it. I think that's the whole point.
But do you think we live in a society which is dominated by images or rather dominated by words, or both?
Well, nowadays that's a very blurred line.
Yeah.
It's very fuzzy at best because with social networking and cell phones, whatever, I think it's a constant overlap of images and text all the time.
But maybe the images are more dominant in a way.
Maybe the images are
more dominant because you can always choose not to read the text.
Yeah, I guess that's a good. Yeah,
that's true. There is a.
Yeah.
It's a very, I don't know.
So what weighs more, a word or a work?
Definitely a work.
A work?
Of art, you mean?
But,
yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, within the contemporary art scope, of course, images are more important. I mean, that's
exactly.
absolutely, that's a concept of paramount importance. I will never transcend from that.
Simon, you agree with that?
Completely agree, yes.
Okay, so we agree on one thing. Should we leave it here? Is there a question from the public?
No questions. Okay.
Good, then I think we finish the talk here. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Simon.
you. Thanks.
Michele, Vanessa, thank you.
Thank you.